I was part of the most elite, well-trained unit in the United States Navy for almost 10 years. It's not the Navy SEALs, my friend, it's the Navy Band. I was born and raised in a small Texas town on the Gulf of Mexico, right by Houston. I started playing saxophone about the age of 12 in junior high school, and about that time was getting better pretty quickly. My dad's a massive jazz and blues fan, so as we drove around, we were always listening to either Texas country, jazz, or blues. About the time I was 13 or 14, I was getting a lot better on the saxophone, and my parents surprised me with a hell of a surprise, and that was a brand new saxophone for Christmas. And I just really cherished that thing, carried it back and forth to school every day, and just started to practice a lot of hours. Yeah, I was really fortunate to just have the best parents I could ever ask for. And my second year of music, my dad found out about a man in Houston by the name of Conrad Johnson. And Mr. Johnson was a lifelong music teacher. He lived in the inner city of Houston. And at that time, my dad started driving me up to go see Mr. Johnson, and I would go once a week. And it was about an hour, maybe an hour and a half each way every time, and my dad never complained. Mr. Johnson was really just an amazing human being, nicest, kindest, and most generous man you could ever want to meet, really. And he was pretty old at the time when I started taking lessons from him, and I did take lessons for 6 more years after that, driving to Houston once a week, pretty much like clockwork. I very rarely, if ever, missed a lesson with Mr. Johnson. So just as high school was getting ready to start, Mr. Johnson mentioned that there was a high school in the middle of Houston called HSPVA, or the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts, and they were auditioning students and had recently opened up the application to students outside of the Houston Independent School District. So the 4 years at HSPVA went really quickly. It was very intense. I'd usually get up about 5:30 in the morning before my family was awake. I would make myself breakfast, and then this beautiful dancer would appear in her cool Camaro. Michelle was 2 years older than me and had been going to HSPVA for 2 years. She would come and pick me up at my house, and we would drive the hour to an hour and a half into the middle of Houston to get to the high school. HSPVA back in the late 80s was just an amazing environment, really caring teachers, and everybody in the school was pretty damn smart. You had to audition and have academic marks to get in. I was surrounded by good people, and I got to play music, sometimes 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day while I was there. Usually Michelle would drop me off in the morning. I'd go straight to my band classes. She was in the dance department. And at the end of the day, after all was said and done, she would pick me up, sometimes after rehearsals, so, 3, 4 in the afternoon. We'd head back to our little town and fight the traffic again. Attending HSPVA was a very positive environment for me. I went from my little bitty Texas town, I'm talking so small. We had one little general store when I was a kid. And, I would ride my bike to school every day, which was, 5 minutes max on the bike from my house. But, people had a different idea of the world, and, most people never left that little town for the most part. And then I went up to Houston, where HSPVA was, and it was a totally different scene. People from all over the world, a lot of different cultures living there. And if you know anything about Houston, HSPVA at that time was on Montrose and Westheimer, which was a big gay population. And I thought that was great because I met a lot of people from different backgrounds with different ideas and really opened my mind. The wonderful thing was some of my teachers were massive hippies. So they were free thinking, and it really opened my mind to, hey, there's more out in the world than just my little Texas town I grew up in. I graduated from HSPVA in 1989, and at that time, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. and was thinking about going to school for business at the University of Texas. My brother went to UT. And as the end of my school year approached, I had signed up for business school, but a life-changing event was coming my way, and that was when the Navy Band showed up at my high school for a recruiting tour. They were traveling as the Jazz Big Band. It was really one of the best bands I'd ever seen in my life. They were really incredible. Every one of the guys in the band was very top-notch musician, truly inspiring. When the Navy Band finished their set, they had their recruiting booth set up out in the hall. And, I went up and talked to them, just kind of see, hey, wow, you guys are amazing. And what do you exactly do in the Navy? And they said, well, the band is part of the United States Navy. We're enlisted in the Navy, and we travel all around the world in support of mainly the U.S. embassies and the President of the United States. To say my meeting with a Navy band was life-altering might be an understatement. Once I found out, these guys get to practice all day and they travel around and play music for presidents and princes and dignitaries all over the world, I almost couldn't believe it. And my dad was a Navy man. He served in the United States Navy as part of the Seabees, which is the construction battalion, in Vietnam. And my dad always spoke very highly of his time in the Navy, even though it was fraught with a lot of danger. He was a combat veteran in Vietnam, didn't have the best time, but nonetheless, he did say the Navy was fantastic for him. And so I started to talk to my recruiter in my little hometown, and they set up an audition for me. And at the ripe age of 18, I was going to fly off to New Orleans just before I graduated high school and audition for the Navy Band. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. This is my little story, and in the next few chapters, I'm going to get into auditioning for the Navy Band and going out to boot camp, maybe the toughest 2 months of my life, and then off to my first duty station, which was Yokosuka, Japan, and the 7th Fleet Band. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you fairly soon. Fair winds and following seas to you all.